What up, YouTube? It is your boy, Adam of Nola, and today we are going to go through 38 quotes that expose religion for what it really is. Now, if you've watched any of my other listicle kind of videos, you probably know already that we may have 39 or I may get to 37. It always seems at some point that the count gets a little off, but we'll do as well as we can. I don't have these in any particular order, so I'm going to just begin right at the top and plow through them as fast as we can. Number one on the list is, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. That, of course, is from the late, great Christopher Hitchens. I love this one because I feel like since I've been doing this YouTube thing, I see so many more examples of people on the theist side of the fence, of course, that just want to assert. Now, they use different terms. They try to be a little sneaky with it. They'll say things like truth claims, which is just a way of stuffing the term truth into your assertion. And you could argue this isn't even specifically an anti-religious or atheist statement, although the fact that it was stated by Christopher Hitchens kind of exposes it. And I would imagine that in most scenarios where you might be tempted to bring up this quote, you're probably talking to a theist. But in any area of life, if someone is just asserting stuff, then it is perfectly valid to just dismiss it just as fast. And one last point on that before we move on. Just because you assert something doesn't mean that it's wrong. I don't tell you that it's wrong just because it's an assertion. Maybe your assertion is absolutely correct, but until you can give me any reason to evaluate it as anything other than just an assertion, don't be surprised if I dismiss it just as quickly. Now, numbers 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to group together. Stephen F. Roberts' version of this is, I contend that we are both atheists. I just believe in one fewer God than you do. When you understand why you dismiss all the other possible gods, you will understand why I dismiss yours. There is Ricky Gervais's version of it that I know I saw him say on The Late Show, and that refers to there being roughly 3,000 gods, and Christians or any other monotheist essentially dismisses 2,999 of them. Ricky Gervais just dismisses one more. And then we see Richard Dawkins saying essentially the same thing. The only thing that I would take to task in any of these three quotes is the conclusion drawn by Stephen F. Roberts, where he says, when you understand why you dismiss all the other possible gods, you will understand why I dismiss yours. Unfortunately, in the conversations that I've seen online, at least with Christians, I can't actually give them credit for that because it seems so often that you can still point out, oh, do you dismiss Vishnu? Do you dismiss Allah? Do you dismiss Zeus? Do you dismiss Ra? And they will say yes to all those things because, of course, they will dismiss any other god and any other assertion out of hand if it doesn't come from Christianity. And yet, when you try to move to the logical conclusion then you understand why I have dismissed your God, there is still somehow this fundamental disconnect. But it is still an extremely useful quote because so many of the things that I now find it natural to reject in Christianity, Christians also find it just as natural to reject out of hand. The only difference as to whether or not they accept it or reject it is, does it have the FDA-approved stamp from Christianity? If it does not, they reject it. If it does, they can't seem to understand how you could possibly reject it. Number 5, of course, is a classic. If this was in a ranked order, I might have had to put it number 1. It is from our de facto Lord and Savior, Carl Sagan, and it is that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now, I've always loved this quote. Before I started doing this channel and really diving down this rabbit hole, I have to admit that I never even saw it as being an atheist quote or an anti-religious quote. Of course, I knew that it could be used in such a context, but to me, it just felt like a natural quote to pull out anytime someone's talking about flat Earth or 9/11 conspiracies or moon landing conspiracies or anything else that you would assume obviously must require extraordinary evidence because the person is making an extraordinary claim. Of course, now that I've been diving even deeper into this Christian/atheist/religious content, it has become kind of disturbing to me to see the extent to which Christians in some sectors have almost made sport out of attacking this axiom. And that blows my mind because I don't think there is any logical basis on which you can attack this axiom. Now, that doesn't mean that your extraordinary claim should be abandoned. That doesn't mean I'm telling you that your extraordinary claim is false, but I am telling you that if you want your extraordinary claim to be taken seriously by those who don't already accept it, then you damn well better come through with some extraordinary evidence, particularly in regard to the resurrection. I've seen these write-ups from the apologists where they try to scoff and dismiss this axiom because they say, oh, they're just using naturalistic materialism. Yeah? And what's wrong with that? When you were claiming that someone was raised from the dead, an event that in real time or with empirical evidence we have never seen happen in the entire history of humanity. Every time there has ever been a supposed resurrection that has ever happened in the past or even anywhere near today, it is always hearsay, it's legend, it's never anything that can be confirmed. And yet they want to dismiss as naturalistic materialism or materialistic naturalism, this idea that we want extraordinary evidence for your miracle claims. Some people are just never going to get it, I guess. Number 6 is from Matt Dillahunty. It says, a God that doesn't manifest in reality is indistinguishable from a God that doesn't exist. Another beautiful quote to me, because like so many of these others, it doesn't tell you that your God doesn't exist. It kind of lays out the logical case right there and then lets you make your own conclusion. So sure, maybe your God's up there somewhere in the heavens. But if he cannot or will not manifest in any distinguishable way in reality, and no, I don't mean that there was a baby born or your grandpa had his cancer cured. That is no way a miracle. But if this God cannot manifest in reality or refuses to do so, then he or she or it or whatever we're calling this being is indistinguishable from fantasy. For 7, 8, and 9, I have grouped together 3 quotes from Mark Twain. He was always a great quote machine back in his day. Not that I remember it, but you can look up all the things that he said. And of course, many of them had nothing to do with religion or atheism, but nevertheless, he had some fun things to say. So number 7 is, I do not fear death. I have been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. Contrary to a lot of his quotes that are kind of pithy, a bit snarky at times, I find this one to be pretty profound. I will be the first one to tell you, as an atheist, that for atheists and theists alike, the fear of death is one of the most profound fears that anyone can ever fear. Now, you may not walk around in this constant fear of death, but somehow, somewhere, baked into our DNA, there is this existential imperative for us to almost always want to stay alive at all times as long as possible. There are, of course, exceptions to that. But in general, we don't want to die, and that's a good thing. And I don't think any atheist is looking forward to death any more than a Christian. I don't think that they're fearing it any more than a Christian. But I love this quote from him, because you can tell me that I'll be burning in hell with eternal conscious torment all you want. And I think that's really what seeps into the brains of so many theists. But I have every confidence that when my time comes, it'll be like unplugging the computer. The computer was unplugged prior to 52 years ago. And at some point in the future, hopefully not too soon, it will be unplugged again. And just like my computer couldn't care less when it's literally unplugged, neither will I. Now, I know that not everyone believes that, and a lot of people don't want to believe that because their fear of death is so embedded, so ingrained into their system, that even the idea that you could be turned off for some people is terrifying. Now, I don't want that. I'm not looking forward to death. But to me, there's nothing scary about it. Now, of course, if I'm laying on my deathbed, I'm sure I will have some angst, but I don't lay awake at night worried about what's going to happen after I die, because I also don't lay awake at night feeling angst over what happened or didn't happen before I was born. I didn't care. And at some point in the not too distant future, I won't care again. The next two quotes, number 8 and 9, are also from Mark Twain. I'm going to kind of lump them together because they have a similar theme. Number 8 is, the Bible has noble poetry in it and some good morals and a wealth of obscenity and upwards of 1,000 lies. And the 9th quote, also from Mark Twain, is, it isn't the parts of the Bible that I can't understand that bothers me. It is the parts that I do understand. I love these two quotes because as much as I rail against things like the Bible, I will be the first one to tell you that on some level, it's a deeply interesting book. There are at least pieces of it that are thought-provoking, eloquent, peaceful, hopeful, etc. The problem is that there are also many, many, many other pieces of it that are none of those things and much worse. And unfortunately, there are so many people in this country, in this world, who identify as Christians who have only ever been selectively spoon-fed the beautiful pieces, the verses that sound lovely in a Sunday morning sermon, or the pieces that look great when they're crocheted on a pillow. But if you really get into it and read the whole thing, aside from those little bits of beauty, you're also going to find a lot of not so beautiful. But that won't happen unless you actually read it, keep an open mind, and pay attention. Number 10 is the famous and ancient quote from Epicurus. Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he's not omnipotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he's malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Well, then whence cometh evil? And is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? Aside from this, obviously diving into the age-old question of the problem of evil or the problem of suffering, I really like this quote as well, because to me, a lot of those problems melt away if you don't cling stubbornly and desperately to this idea that your God is all the omnis, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, omniscient. When you start from the Old Testament, those omni qualities aren't there. I mean, they really just aren't there. Now, as you get into the New Testament, there is a greater sense, both in the text itself and in the established mores of the day, that this idea of God was much more omni. But the Old Testament, especially the Old Testament, was anything but omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent. And I bring this up because so many of these problems that people start twisting their heads into knots over actually go away if you don't assume that your mighty God is all the omnis. Now, I realize that leads to another set of theological questions, because some people would be freaked out mentally if they didn't think that their God had all the omnis, that their God was literally all powerful, all loving, all knowing, etc., 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 etc. But when you tack on all of these omni qualities to your God that aren't there in the text, then it leads to a lot of other deeper issues. And even if you don't look at the text, when you look at the world around you, trying to figure out why these things happen, if your God is supposedly omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, that starts to cause real and deep spiritual cognitive dissonance. Whereas if you, I'm sorry to put it this way, but sorry, not sorry. If you grow up a little and you realize that even if you believe in God, he doesn't have to be all things to all people like the true magic sky daddy. But if you think of him more in a classic representation of an ancient God, a lot of what happens in the world makes more sense. Then it's not that God allows suffering, it's that God isn't all places at all times. And God didn't have a plan for that hurricane hitting your house. Some of it is just nature. God didn't give you cancer as some kind of test, or give your child cancer as some way to affect some future plan that nobody could know, because we don't understand God's mysteries. The real and sad But very real fact is that sometimes people just get cancer. Sometimes hurricanes hit the places where we live. Sometimes disasters happen. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. And you don't have to stay up at night worrying about it as much if you don't have to think about, why did God let this happen? Or why did God do this to me? That's the kind of stuff that breaks people. That's the kind of stuff that really cripples faith. The 11th quote is from Isaac Asimov. Properly read, the Bible is the most potent force for atheism ever conceived. I loved this quote because I pulled this up just recently, and I did not know that Isaac Asimov said this. And in my God-free Bible study and in other videos that I've been doing for this channel, I have said on numerous occasions that the best case against Christianity is the Bible. If you ever want to deconstruct someone as fast as possible, assuming they have even a smidge of open-mindedness somewhere in their apologist brain, well, the best thing to do is sit them down and have them read the Bible, ideally from the first page to the last, because, oh man, it'll really hit you. Now, obviously that doesn't work if you're already hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool Christian and all you want to do is make excuses for every incongruity that you find in the text. But if you can be even moderately open-minded about it, the best case against Christianity is the Bible. Number 12 is from Henry Chadwick. He says, a saint is a person whose life has been under-researched. I love this because I'm not Catholic, although I did spend some time being kind of like cross-raised by my grandparents in a Catholic home. So I was exposed to the Catholic side and the Protestant side, even though my parents were always Protestant. And even though I don't pretend to be any expert on Catholicism, I do know, at least on a cursory level, about all the saints. I have learned a little bit about the whole sainthood process, the beatification process. And part of it is that it has to be confirmed that they actually effected some kind of miracles. And it won't shock you to find that this miracle confirmation is not exactly scientifically rigorous. I know. Who'd have thunk it? And it usually takes the form of, after they were dead, someone said that they prayed to this person who I guess wasn't even sainted, but someone still prayed to them, and then a miracle happened. Like, after I die, hopefully quite a ways off in the future, but hopefully some of these videos are still floating around on YouTube. They'll look very dated, and they probably wouldn't have gotten a view in ages. But wouldn't it be wonderful if after I'm dead, somebody could say, I prayed to Adam of Nola and my hemorrhoids went away. It's just some stupid crap like that, you know? And if we can document like 2 or 3 of these suckers happening, I could be a saint. All you people could be praying to Adam of Nola. Oh, not that I'll care because I won't be here and I won't know what's going on, but what a lovely thought that is. Number 13 is from American icon Frederick Douglass. He said, I prayed for freedom for 20 years, but received no answer until I prayed with my legs. Now, honestly, that's a little sobering if you ask me. And for those who aren't in America or don't know American history, if it's not clear, Frederick Douglass was a slave. He escaped and he became quite a well-known man of letters and a lobbyist and was very, very well respected. But this quote to me is so crushing. The idea that he prayed for 20 years and nothing worked until he prayed with his legs. Now, I'll be frank, when I was a Christian myself, I would have said, yeah, that's called God helps those who help themselves. That would have been my dodge, my retort to this, which would have been really cheap. But the simple fact is that if God helps those who help themselves, then just help yourself. Because Frederick Douglass prayed and God wasn't freeing him. I'm not going to say that the answer to life's problems is that you solve them all yourself, because we are social beings. We need and desire the help, the aid of those around us, whether they're friends, family, strangers, employers, whoever. So I'm not going to say that you can bootstrap everything and make yourself successful with no aid. But if you think that all that aid is going to come from the magic sky daddy, Well, Frederick Douglass had a different lesson for you. Number 14, Susan Ertz said, millions long for immortality who don't know what to do with themselves on a rainy Sunday afternoon. I love this quote partially because I have contended for quite a while. And part of the reason that I started deconstructing and didn't care much more for Christianity, even before I delved into the moral atrocities and the monstrous nature of the Christian God, even before any of that, I started thinking about heaven. Specifically, I started thinking about eternity. And I've said this before to people on many occasions. I want to live within reason a long life, hopefully a long, healthy, happy life. But like most people, I don't want to die today. I don't want to die soon. I hope that I still have as many years as possible, although I'm already on the latter half of this life at best. And if you gave me a button right now on my desk and I could push the button, and you said by pushing the button, you will get 10 more years of healthy, happy life, I'd push the button. Easily. I wouldn't have to think about it. However long I'm going to live, let's just say I was going to live to be 80 anyway. He said, by pushing the button, you'll live to be 90. Boom, I pushed the button. Don't have to think about it. If you said, okay, push the button and you'll get 50 more years. And so instead of 90, I can go from 80 to 140. I'd push the button. If you told me I could live 500 more years by pushing the button, I'd probably push it because that would be a wild ride in my opinion. You'd kind of be like Highlander or something, but you might get bored. You'd have, of course, the sadness of seeing loved ones all around you die, but I'd still sign up for that ride. But if you put a button in front of me and said, push the button and you can live forever, even if you said that you will be healthy throughout eternity, even if you said you will be taken care of in terms of income and niceties around you, I still would never, ever, ever push that button. Now, I don't know at what point you'd have to stretch out the value proposition before I'd finally say, no, I'm not pushing the button. But I do know this. If the button you gave me to push said I could live forever, no matter how good my health would be, no matter how generally comfortable I would supposedly be in this eternity, there is no way in hell that I would ever want to push that button. So I love this quote because it gets to this issue. These people that sometimes don't know what to do with themselves on a rainy Sunday afternoon, and yet they talk in these beautiful platitudes about being in heaven. Like, dude, you can't even keep yourself busy for a couple of hours. You go stir crazy, or you just waste it re-binge watching some show that you've already seen 3 times. I mean, that is not seizing the day. That's basically giving yourself a good excuse to get out of this life as fast as possible. So think twice before you really assume that you want that eternal afterlife. I mean, I don't think you're getting it anyway, but even if you think that's what you're working toward, okay, sure, that'll be great. Number 15, coming from the wise Emo Phillips. When I was a kid, I used to pray every night for a new bicycle. Then I realized that the Lord doesn't work that way. So I stole one and asked him to forgive me. Now, obviously, Emo Phillips is a comedian. I still love the quote because God ain't getting you a bicycle. In fact, God ain't getting you anything that's material or it's going to actually help you in the material plane. But we can always claim that God forgived our sin. So while I do not endorse anyone ever going out and stealing a bicycle, in fact, I don't endorse you ever going out and stealing anything, I will say that the path to getting more prayers answered that require some kind of physical component is just to go seize them and then beg for forgiveness. Number 16 is maybe on a similar note, but a bit more sober, from George Santayana, who says, prayer among sane people has never superseded practical efforts to secure the desired end. Another way that you can think of this is take your thoughts and prayers and shove them right up your ass. Because if all you've got is prayer to help me out, then I don't even want to see your face, dude. If I got problems and I need some help, or if I need to help myself, then I need to just get out and help myself and not depend on that prayer. You can pray the whole time, while you're helping someone else in the physical realm or while you're helping yourself. But prayer superseding actual effort is pretty damn stupid. Number 17 comes from Tracy Harris. She used to be on the Atheist Experience, and this says, things that do not exist cannot be the cause of other things. I love this quote because when you first read this sounds just like the crap that Christians will want to aim at atheists when they think they're scoring some rhetorical dig like, oh, you think everything came from nothing. Checkmate, atheist. Which, first of all, that is not what most atheists believe. And every time you let something stupid like that come out of your mouth, you are just exposing your own ignorance. But even if we wanted to accept that, yes, atheists think everything came from nothing, so do you. You could sit there and say, well, God did it. Yeah, where'd God come from? And then you give me the, oh, he's outside of space and time. Oh, that is so stupid and small-minded and ignorant. So don't give me this crap about, you think everything came from nothing. So do you. So wallow in that one for a minute, because things that do not exist cannot be the cause of other things. So if you want to tell me that your magic sky daddy completely outside of space and time, the uncaused causer is what made everything come into being, then that is the most intellectually lazy dodge that has ever been created in the entire history of mankind. Number 18 might actually be my favorite. It would be right up there with Carl Sagan, but this is from Voltaire. It says, anyone who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. I'm not going to go way off the rails on this, but I want to tell you that this is literally one of the reasons why I have this channel right now. It's not that I think that all religious people are bad. Of course they are not. I don't think that all things that happen as a result of religion are bad. Of course not. But what religion does is it absolutely trains you, usually since birth, through massive indoctrination, to believe absurdities. And once you have been trained to believe these absurdities, you can absolutely have that flipped on you to start committing atrocities. And you may think, no, I would never commit atrocities. But did the Israelites think that they were committing atrocities when they were following through on the orders of their supreme deity, Yahweh, who told them to slaughter all of the Canaanites, including the men, the women, and the children, and the livestock, and to leave nothing alive that breathes? And you might think that you are immune to this, but everybody thinks that they're immune to it until they are given the order to commit atrocities. That is the insidious and so deeply dangerous aspect of religion. Now, again, I'm not claiming that every religion out there right now is in the act of committing genocide or committing horrible atrocities. I'm not saying that you would ever be brought into such a horrific idea. Hopefully, you have the moral fortitude to stand up against those type of disgusting demands. But throughout history, it has been proven time and time again that, as Voltaire said, those who believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Now, even if someone hasn't made you believe absurdities, there are other ways to make people commit atrocities. I understand this. But one of the most effective ways to empower a virtual army of people who will commit atrocities on your behalf is to ensure that from birth, they have been mindlessly trained to believe absurdities. Number 19. This is kind of related to the previous one. This comes from Floyd Toole. In science, contrary evidence causes one to question a theory. In religion, contrary evidence causes one to question the evidence. Mindshift did a great video where he was talking about, are your beliefs unfalsifiable? And if you are religious, at least those part of your beliefs are mostly unfalsifiable. And that may feel like a non-issue, but anytime that you are training yourself to reject evidence or question the evidence before you question the conclusions, that is dangerous. Now, to be clear, always question the evidence. Always make sure that your evidence is sound. This quote is not saying that you should never question evidence. But if you're only interested in questioning the evidence and you cannot bring yourself to question the underlying theory, that is a very deep cognitive problem. And sooner or later, it's going to bite you in the ass. Number 20 is from one of my favorite authors of all time, Philip K. Dick. He says, reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. Now, as a Christian, I could have told you a retort to this, which is that, well, you don't have to believe in my God anymore. That doesn't make my God go away. But the underlying theme here is that the empirical realities of science, of naturalistic facts, they're not going away. You can tell me all day about your conspiracy creationist bullshit, but guess what? That doesn't make your 6,000-year Earth story anything other than patently stupid. And you will continue to be laughed out of the room with anyone who has any education, any knowledge, and any intellectual self-respect for the rest of your natural life. That is the simple fact. You don't have to believe it, but the facts like the age of the Earth, the facts like evolution, they aren't going away. They're still going to be there, and people will still be gathering more evidence and refining those theories and learning new things as you wallow in your ignorance. Number 21, a, quote, moral commandment, unquote, is a contradiction in terms. The moral is the chosen, not the forced. The understood, not the obeyed. That comes from Ayn Rand, she of the famous Atlas Shrugged. I will, first of all, throw out a disclaimer here. When I was younger, I have to admit, I was quite the little Ayn Rand fanboy. At this point in my life, and for quite some time now, I've come to realize that she has some good ideas. She's also pretty damn screwed up in a lot of things. And I'm no longer this complete ate-up, who is John Galt fanboy. But nevertheless, she had some really good ideas. And I do love this because what she's essentially talking about in different terminology is divine command theory. If your morality comes from commands, it's not morality at all. And it sure as hell ain't objective. So if you think that your morality comes from the commands of your magic sky daddy, you have no morality. Anytime you have to command someone how to act, they are not acting as a moral actor. They are acting as a moral agent, which means that as soon as the commands change that are being given to the moral agent, the effective actions and the morality of the moral agent change as well. If you want to have your own morality, learn how to be moral without your magic sky daddy commanding everything to you. How would you like to be one of my advisors? I'm using Skepticus's memberships as a way to allow you to have a voice in the content and the direction of this channel. I hope to see you in the membership pool, and I want to hear your voice in what Skepticus is doing going forward. Number 22 comes from one of the greatest philosophers of our day. I'm talking about the late, great George Carlin. He said, religion has actually convinced people that there's an invisible man living in the sky who watches everything you do every minute of every day. And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time. But he loves you. Yeah, you go, George Carlin. Please come back soon. When George Carlin gets resurrected, I will seriously reconsider my atheistic tendencies. Number 23 comes from Dan Barker, the founder of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. He says, asking if there is no God, what is the purpose of life, is like asking if there is no master, whose slave will I be? I love this quote because too many times in these arguments for God, I've seen this meaning of life used somehow as a justification for God himself, as though I feel like I need God for meaning and therefore God exists, which does not follow. I will admit that there are plenty of people, religious people, who derive meaning from their religion, and That's fine if that serves a purpose for them. But to try to claim that the meaning that you derive from religion is somehow a proof for the religion or the God itself just doesn't make any sense. Conversely, even if I were somehow miserable and felt devoid of meaning because I'm an atheist and I don't know what to do with my life, that still is no argument that says that your God exists or that your religion is right. Neither one of these premises follow. And yet I hear this commonly on the YouTubeosphere, and I hear people saying, oh, then what would be the meaning of life without God? I don't know and I don't care, because it doesn't matter whether there is no meaning to life whatsoever. That still does nothing to convince any logical person that your magic sky daddy actually exists. To put it in simpler terms, you can't wish your all-powerful being into existence just because you think that's what you need in order to have meaning in your life. Number 24 comes from amazing entertainer and atheist icon Penn Jillette. He says, if every trace of any single religion died out and nothing were passed on, it would never be created exactly that way again. There might be some other nonsense in its place, but not that exact nonsense. If all of science were wiped out, it would still be true, and someone would still find a way to figure it all out again. As a side note on this, I will say, although I don't find any particular argument for God to be convincing, if I did have to pick what is my favorite argument for God, which I still don't think works, but if I had to pick what I thought was the most compelling argument for God, for me, it would be, I don't even know if it's defined this way, but like the argument from math. You could argue this is kind of like the fine-tuning argument, which I find bullocks, but the math piece makes at least some bit of intuitive sense to me, only because if every mathematician in the world were wiped out in some horrific accident and nobody among us even knew how to add, not only would we eventually get it all back, but all the equations would be the same. The Pythagorean theorem would be the same. The formula for the area of a circle would be the same. I mean, these are all things that are just discovered. Now, I don't actually think that that does anything to truly prove or even make a really good case for the existence of God, but at least I do understand that math is the only universal language. And I do mean universe in the universe sense. I don't mean just, oh, it would be everywhere on Earth. I mean, if we were to meet intelligent species from across the galaxy or in other galaxies, we may have no other common means for language, but they would have math and we would have math. And if we understood the symbols, if we could get past that incongruity, the rest of the math would match up. Number 25 from Richard Feynman. He says, I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. I included this because one of my frustrations with theism in general and Christians specifically is just this stubborn inability sometimes to say, I don't know. We'll probably know at some point in the future, but I don't know. And that's okay. And then they'll actually try to throw in your face this idea that their God of the gaps has more, wait for it, explanatory power. They'll say, oh, well, then where do you think the universe came from? And I'll say, I don't know. I wasn't there. And we don't have enough evidence right now to really say exactly where it came from or how it all began. Even if we dial back as far as we can with the Big Bang, we still don't know where it came from or how it all started. That doesn't mean atheists think that everything came from nothing. I'm tired of that already. That does not follow. But nevertheless, if we had to find some answer, eventually, I would still tell you today that we don't know. And guess what? I'm fine with that. And when you then want to say, well, we have our God, that's where everything came from. That's not an answer. That is just a tiny-minded dodge. It answers nothing. You have tried to solve one of the greatest mysteries in the entire universe by plugging in An even bigger mystery that makes even less sense, is completely untestable, and has no precedent whatsoever in the entire history of man. I award you no points. You have failed miserably. Number 26 from H.L. Mencken. He says, morality is doing what is right, no matter what you are told. Religion is doing what you are told, no matter what is right. I love this because, again, one of the stupid hacks that Christians try to aim at you as an atheist is, oh, you have no morality. You think everything that you want to do is right, or you're only an atheist because you want to sin. All the while, they will follow any commandment, no matter how craven, as long as someone has managed to convince them that it is somehow tied to their blind religious beliefs. And then they have the audacity to talk down to atheists about morality. Grow the hell up. Number 27 from Bertrand Russell. Atheism is what happens when you read the Bible. Yes, Bertrand. Christianity is what happens when somebody else reads it for you. I love that. Going back to the Bible theme, we've covered this in a few other quotes, but I do find this to be profound because this is one thing that I've been hammering away on in my channel. This is one thing that I hammer away on in my God-Free Bible Study series, because I'm reading the whole damn Bible. And despite all your stupid, sad claims that I'm taking it out of context, I start at page 1 and we're eventually going to go all the way through the whole damn book. Now, I've read the whole thing front to back multiple times before, but I'm doing it now on camera, and it's disgusting. And so many of the Christians that defend it are the opposite of this. I actually have a close friend, but this close friend has been sitting down with his wife and his kids, and they've been reading the Bible from the beginning to the end, which they had never done. And he literally called me the other day, and he's like, oh man, like this is hard to deal with, and this is hard to explain to the kids because it's a disgusting book on so many levels. And the Christians who will fight you so badly on that point, either A, they haven't really read it, and I'd say that's about 80 or 85% of them, and the remaining ones are just so hopelessly apologetic that they will make excuses for whatever is in the book. Number 28 from Victor Stenger. Science flies you to the moon. Religion flies you into buildings. That's pretty sobering. I believe that quote was made shortly after 9/11. It's really a variation on the getting people to perform atrocities once you get them to believe absurdities, but it really hits you, in my opinion. The next two I'm lumping together because they both come from Neil deGrasse Tyson, a personal hero of Skepticus. Side note on that, I have seen some bizarre stuff on Christian YouTube attacking this guy and making these snide little comments. And this just blows my mind. I'm not saying he's perfect. He has made mistakes. But to attack this guy just seems like the most misguided use of your attentions. Not because he agrees with all you Christians, but this is not a guy who you really need to or really want to be undermining because, yes, he's all for science. Guess what? All the other scientists are too. But this is a guy who's incredibly well-spoken. He's very open-minded, and I don't mean in a Christian way, but he's not going to dismiss things out of hand. And I don't think it's a good idea to put Neil deGrasse Tyson in your crosshairs. But you know what? You pick your enemies. You do what you want to do. But the first quote from him, which would be number 29 in our list, is, I'm constantly claimed by atheists. I find this intriguing. In fact, on my wiki page, I didn't create the wiki page. Others did. And I'm flattered that people cared enough about my life to assemble it. And it said, Neil deGrasse is an atheist. I just thought this was really interesting. First of all, his point is well taken. I did know that Neil deGrasse Tyson has never come out and said, I am an atheist. I'm pretty sure that if you listen to a lot of stuff and read his stuff, I'm pretty sure he's an agnostic. And he may even be more atheistic, but just doesn't want to say it because That's not his position. He's not trying to go out there and fight religious wars. He's an advocate for science. But whether he is an agnostic or an atheist or a secret Buddhist or whatever, who knows? To me, the deeper point here is this. When people come out in the public space and talk about aspects of science or talk about anything as science relates to the Bible, and they talk about it not in a dogmatic way, but they talk about it in an intellectual, knowledgeable, rigorous way, they by default kind of get pegged as atheists. Think about that. I'll give you another quick example. Like, I really enjoy watching Dan McClellan's videos. I think he's a great biblical scholar. He doesn't do everything perfectly, but no content creator ever does. Clearly a very brilliant guy, though. Very well read, well educated, etc. Even if you don't agree with all of his takes, I think it would be ridiculous to even try to argue with his pedigree. He knows what he's talking about, even if you don't agree with all of his theological takes. But the point is, for a while, I really thought that he was an atheist content creator. And I now know he's a Mormon. He's made a point on numerous shows to say, look, I don't talk about my personal beliefs in these shows. It's because what he's trying to do in a public space is in favor of biblical scholarship, not Christian apologetics or not apologetics of any kind. He's trying to, and actually is, engaging these questions from a purely scholarly perspective. And like I said, I think he does it incredibly well. But it's so sad that anytime we see someone attack anything related to religion with an intellectual rigor and with an open mind, by default, we tend to think that they're atheists, because it's really hard to find that same type of approach from anyone who openly identifies as religious. And I see this quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson in kind of the same way. Anytime you're talking about cosmology, astrophysics, which of course at times talks back to issues related to the origin of the universe itself, at some point you're going to bump into these theological ideas, even if you don't want to dive deep into the theological muck. And when you do that and you don't toe the apologist line, by default, you tend to get labeled as an atheist. Now, of course, as an atheist myself, I'm fine with that. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it's very interesting that just to be intellectually rigorous sometimes automatically has people putting you in the bucket of atheists. Think about that. What does that say about religion? The other quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson that I chose, which is number 30 on our list, is the universe is under no obligation to make sense to you. I love this quote. This kind of plays back to the issue I was talking about, where it's okay to say, I don't know. And there are some mysteries of the universe that maybe even as a species, we will never solve, because even when you solve one problem, it opens the door to the next three problems. That's not a bad thing. That is actually the intellectual joy of science. But ultimately, you can't solve these mysteries by stuffing God into the gaps. And although he's not addressing God in this quote, I do think that this quote in God of the Gaps is kind of related, because if the universe is not making sense to you, which again is not a bad thing, that means there's a frontier there, either a frontier of science, which means our knowledge as a whole, or a frontier of your knowledge and your intellect, which is not a bad thing. That is a challenge. That's like the universe saying to you, hey, here's the mystery we've given you. What can you figure out about it? That's a beautiful thing. But the universe doesn't have to make sense to you. And if you accept that, because it is truth, I think it's so much healthier. Because once you accept it, you stop grasping for any ridiculous answer that you can shove into the gaps. And you start finally looking with a critical eye and assessing whatever evidence you have and assessing whatever knowledge you have on the subject, and then moving forward in a way that's intellectually honest, rather than just grasping at straws and then trying to bray like a jackass because you think that your made-up solution makes more sense to you. 31 and 32 are from Noam Chomsky. Number 31 is, I don't join the new atheists. So, for example, I wouldn't have the arrogance to lecture some mother who hopes to see her dying child in heaven. That's none of my business, ultimately. I won't lecture her on the philosophy of science. I put this in here because I would be the first one to tell you that, of course, atheists can come across as arrogant. Many of you, Christians, on my channel have accused me of arrogance in my own comments. Am I arrogant? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to really talk definitively or provocatively about these things on YouTube without at least feeling a little cocksure. But I like this quote from Noam Chomsky because despite what you see on YouTube, believe it or not, if you were to run into me at a random bar here in my neighborhood, you're never going to find me having an argument with someone about religion. In fact, I rarely ever discuss religion with anyone outside my house. The only real religious conversations I have beside this one-way conversation with you, my YouTube family, I talk religion now with my wife just because she's here all the time and she's hearing my research and such. I have one friend I talk to on the phone sometimes. We talk about religious stuff, and that's about it. Because for the most part, trying to talk to anyone about religion unless they've actually tried to engage you on the subject is not only not helpful, but it's really close to being a dick. And believe it or not, I'm usually not that big of a dick in public. Now, okay, maybe someone else is going to put up a video and say, yeah, I saw Adam of Nola somewhere and he was a dickhead. I don't know. But I don't run around trying to engage people on this. I certainly would never tell someone who's suffering or having a dying child, like, no, your kid's not going to heaven, or there is no heaven, or if you haven't accepted Jesus, you're going to hell. Like, no. And if I walk into your house and, you're speaking lovingly of your dad who's passed away and you think he's looking down on you and you can't wait to go meet him in heaven, I'm just going to smile and nod because it would be borderline cruel to sit there and say, no, there is no heaven and you're making all this shit up. What's the point of that? It doesn't do any good. So I understand Noam Chomsky's point very well. And it behooves all of us, atheists included, to always remember that everyone deserves empathy and compassion, even if you have no overlap whatsoever in the Venn diagram of their beliefs and yours. Everyone deserves that empathy and that compassion. Number 32, also from Noam Chomsky, he says, there are very few people who are going to look into the mirror and say, that person I see is a savage monster. Instead, they make up some construction that justifies what they do. Now, on the surface, that doesn't explicitly apply to religion, but I think you can see why I included this quote here. Everyone sees themselves as some form of moral actor. Now, I say everyone. I think there are a few people who have slid into this mindset where they're like, I'm a horrible person, and they're self-hating. Almost everyone believes that they are a moral actor, even when they are doing horrific things. And I think it's important for all of us to remember that. I'm not just pointing the finger at religious people, because those people always think that they're justified in their actions. So it's always critical to be self-critical and not allow ourselves to fall into this assumption that we're moral because we're Christian, or because I'm an atheist and I'm better than you, or any other reason. Okay, these next ones are from Sam Harris. Number 33 is, many of my fellow atheists consider all talk of spirituality or mysticism to be synonymous with mental illness, conscious fraud, or self-deception. I have argued elsewhere that this is a problem because millions of people have had experiences for which spiritual and mystical seem the only terms available. I included this because it felt very similar to Noam Chomsky's quote, where it's important to have empathy and to be open-minded when talking to anyone. If you tell me that you had a spiritual or mystical experience, do I believe it? I mean, I may not believe it happened the way that you communicate it to me, but I do believe that you had that experience. I do believe that at least in your mind, the experience happened. Now, if you tell me that you had visions, I don't necessarily believe that there was something floating in front of you. If you tell me that you left your body, I don't necessarily believe that your soul or your consciousness left. It was probably more of a naturalistic experience, my opinion. But I would never sit in front of you and say to you, that's fake, or, you have mental illness or anything like that. I mean, sometimes mental illness absolutely can be a factor in those types of experiences, but it can be incredibly dismissive and also display a complete lack of empathy to just jump to that kind of conclusion. And we should always respect anyone's stated experiences, even if you don't think that what actually happened 100% comports with their report of what happened. Number 34, also from Sam Harris, is my concern with religion is that it allows us by the millions to believe what only lunatics or idiots could believe on their own. That's not to say that all religious people are lunatics or idiots. It's anything but that. So his sentiment to me is absolutely spot on. You're not a lunatic or an idiot because you believe these types of things. But when I finally gave up this pretense that I was Christian, and by pretense, I don't mean that I was never Christian, but I think if you've been deconstructing, there's a period where you're still telling yourself that you're Christian, but you're really not. For most of my life, I really was a Christian. And then there was some period, some undefined area where I was still trying to say the words, but I wasn't really a Christian. And once I finally tore off that Band-Aid and said, okay, I'm not a Christian. This is ridiculous. I'm an atheist. It was amazing when I started to look back at these beliefs, how quickly some of them felt outright stupid. I mean, we just take these things as de rigueur. I mean, in Western Christian societies, nobody thinks it's crazy to talk about a virgin conception or a virgin birth. But that's ridiculous. No one thinks that it's that silly to talk about a talking donkey. But if you bring that up, who hasn't read Numbers in the Old Testament, they think you're an idiot. And admittedly, now I think that those things are stupid too. But you're not stupid for believing those, but it's also at the same time very important, if you can, even in the throes of Christianity, to try to have as neutral a perspective as you can. I'm not saying you have to deconstruct. I'm not saying that you have to abandon your miracle claims, but have some self-awareness, brah. Like, when you want to talk so confidently about this God man who came down and was raised from the dead, and you want to talk about all the evidence that proves it and how it's the most plausible definition of what actually happened, I think that so many Christians caught up in that have lost all perspective on what that actually sounds like. And that's not just a jab on Christians, because you can take almost any religion, because almost every religion has some kind of miracle claims to it. And when you were raised that way, when you are culturally embedded in it, it doesn't sound like lunacy. It just sounds like your tradition, your faith. And then you get out of it and you're like, oh, dude, oh, that's awkward. And I don't want or need you to deconstruct, but I would like it if theists were at least a little more realistic about what they expect me to believe based on nothing but their holy book and their assertions. This kind of plays on the same theme. It just makes it a bit more visceral. This is the last one from Sam Harris. It's number 35. It says, if you wake up tomorrow morning thinking that saying a few Latin words over your pancakes is going to turn them into the body of Elvis Presley, you've lost your mind. But if you think more or less the same thing about a cracker and the body of Jesus, you're just a Catholic. Think about that. 36 comes from Richard Dawkins. We had to get another one in from him. He says, the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. I love this quote because even though I would be shocked at this point in my life if I ever returned to any flavor of theism or God belief at all, if you held a gun to my head and said, Adam, you have to pick some God model as ostensibly the one that you believe in the most, I would have to say deism. Now, don't take this as some statement that Adam is actually becoming a deist. No, but if you look at the world around us, and if you insist that there has to be some magic person up there in the heavens, then what we observe comports most consistently not with theism, but deism. And I say this because I can go into nature and I can look at the beauty of everything around us, or I can go into a delivery room and I can be moved by that experience of watching a new life coming into the world. I mean, I'm not cold and uncaring. You can be in awe of these things and you can feel like it's the presence of a higher being. You can very easily, emotionally, even as an atheist, connect to that point where you feel like, wow, this is so incredible. I can't believe everything just came into being from nothing, which is not what we believe. But anyway, so if you said, fine, I have to pick a God model, deism makes sense for two reasons. First of all, I'm a programmer and I understand what it takes to build a simulation. Not that I could build a simulation of our universe, but the point is I can make all the rules for a simulation and then I can hit go and I never have to touch it again. That doesn't mean I care about every person or every plant or every animal that is created as a part of the program that I ran. It just means that I set all the rules down. I said, okay, this is gravity and this is, how animals are going to come into being and this is how plants are, and then hit go. And you can come back an hour later or a year later or 50 years later and you can just see, oh, what's happened to the simulation. It doesn't mean you gave a crap about anything, any being that was in your simulation. And for all the claims that theists make, I mean, show me something that's not you making crap up that you can show me that God actually intervened. I mean, people have their miracle claims, which are always the most specious, ridiculous claims. They're not even good on the level of eyewitness accounts. They're just poor. And they can just look at the universe and say, oh, it's so beautiful. It has to have the hand of God. But I mean, there is no answer to prayer. There is no manifestation anywhere of your God. I mean, it's literally consistent if you had to pick a God model with a God who just set things off and went away, or a God who set things off and is now hands off and watching from afar. Number 37 is from Bill O'Reilly. I need to do another video just on shitty Christian quotes, but I felt like throwing this one in here near the end. He says, atheists well understand that Christmas is the most visible display of religion in the world, and that any diminishment of it is a good thing to militant secularists. Yeah, Bill, you complete douchebag. I'm not saying that no one in the world is a militant secularist. I have never met one. And trust me, atheists don't give a shit about your Christmas. I mean, some of us care from the perspective that, oh, we still exchange gifts and we go to Christmas dinner and we sit around and watch football or basketball on Christmas Day and we get together with family. So you don't have to be a Christian to take part in these rituals. And there are absolutely atheists who take part to this day in such rituals for many reasons. Sometimes it's just to keep social bonds. Sometimes it's because they enjoy the secular aspects of it. But this fantasy that atheists and agnostics and secularists want to tear down your Christmas, get the hell over yourself, man. But again, the whole Christian quotes about atheists is another video for another day. And the final quote that I have for you is for the one and only, the future saint, Dolly Parton. She says, you don't see too many atheists on the deathbed. They all start cramming then. Now, I love Dolly. If someone can be sainted, it will be Dolly. But I wanted to bring this up. This sentiment I hear from theists, and I don't think they really think this one through. This one is also similar to the "there's no atheists in foxholes" discussion, right? And Christians say this in a smug way, like, well, there's no atheists in foxholes. They think that proves something. I've also seen these stories like Dolly is alluding to, like, well, on their deathbed, no one's an atheist. That's not a selling point for your religion. These are people in desperate scenarios who are afraid for their lives, reasonably so, who may be in pain, they may be in sorrow, they may have a lot of sad people around them. And yeah, when you get desperate, you may reach out for a lot of random ideas. Maybe if I pray this one time to the God I don't believe in, maybe something will happen. That's not a selling point for your religion. That is just an acknowledgement of the fact that given the grave existential fear that most humans have, and given the fact that situations of extreme danger or situations that are end of life are some of the most extreme situations that we will ever experience, it's only natural that sometimes even devout atheists might just grasp at some straws, Does that mean that it exposes a truth about your religion? No. It just exposes some of the sad realities of existential fear. And if the selling point for your religion is that when you're afraid of death or about to die, then you'll be praying to our God, then that's a really weak argument for your petty little God. If your God can't make himself known to me when I'm not in fear of a shell bursting over my head, or when I'm not on death's doorstep, then screw your petty little God. Even if I were to find myself in some medicated, pain-relieving stupor, begging or praying for a few more minutes of life, that does nothing to prove your stupid little deity. It just proves that I'm human, we're all human, and at the end of the day, most of us would like to live another day if we can. That's all that says. Thank you for being with me through these quotes. Like I said, we'll do different versions of these because there are a lot of different quotes we can go through that expose a lot of things about atheism, about theism, about Christianity specifically. But I like to go through these sometimes, and they do a lot of thought spurring for me. I hope they have for you as well. I hope to see you on future videos. If I have screwed up anything, if I have misrepresented the divine, Yahweh, you are always welcome to chime in. Jesus, the Holy Spirit, Zeus, Dolly. Well, no one's home. I guess they all endorse this video. Thank you for being with me. I hope to see you on many future videos. But until I do, lo, I say unto you, stay skeptical.